Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is our second Realtor-Builder panel discussion, and very excited about today's speaker, which Amy will introduce in just a moment. And we are looking forward to hearing about the Brazos Valley outlook of the demographics and housing. And we hope to do this every couple of months and keep both of our members, our industries, apprised of what's happening in our area. So thank you all for joining us. Amy is recording this, and we will be able to send you the link later on. Amy, off to you.
Sounds great. So thanks everybody for attending. We are going to share some great information with you today as a kind of Zoom etiquette reminders. So we've got everybody muted and your cameras off right now. You can certainly turn your cameras back on, but if you will please stay muted, that way we don't have a lot of additional background noise. We are going to take some questions at the end. So if you want to ask some questions, you can send those into the chat box. You can ask those of us. I think you can private message me as well because I'm the host, and so if you want me to ask the question for you, you can do that, but we'll kind of be monitoring the chat as we go along. So we'll save all of our questions to the very end. At the end, you could also unmute if you want to, and then of course we'll send out this presentation to everybody and the video. And then I'm going to quickly, just right now, I'm going to paste into the chat the staff page. Basically it's their directory, and it's going to give you all of the contact information that you might need for Dr. Torres. So I'm going to go ahead and just quickly do that, and then I will introduce him to the group. Again, we thank everybody for coming. Let me get back to my screen. Too many screens. All right. Dr. Torres is with the Texas A&M Real Estate Center. He studies the Texas economy and real estate market, as well as researching the U.S. and world economies. He developed regional indicators that measure economic activity in the real estate industry and forecast housing and commercial markets. Luis also oversees the following center publications: Texas Housing Insight, Outlook for the Texas Economy, Texas Border Economy, and Texas Quarterly Commercial Report. Thank you so much to Dr. Torres for being with us today and speaking to our members. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Amy. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you, Rosemary, for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. First of all, I just want to say I hope everyone is well and safe. It's been a difficult year, just to say, not overstate that. The good news is that we're almost at the end of the pandemic, thank God. And why is that? Because of the vaccines. Actually, now 2 vaccines that have shown to work and be safe. And I think that's going to allow us to put the pandemic behind us, close that chapter, and move forward. So that's great news to all of us, right? And for the housing market, although the housing market has been doing extraordinarily well during the pandemic. I think it surprised all of us, even the economists and the market participants, on how well the housing market has done. In a minute, I'll tell you, we have some ideas of why it's happened. Why has the housing market done so well during health crisis and during recession? I know if we work in the housing market, we would never think that we're actually in a recession currently, and we are, right? It's doing so well. But in a minute, I'll discuss the whys, the demographics behind that, the reasons and numbers behind why the housing market is doing so well during a health crisis and during a pandemic. Let me just start by talking about some numbers for the Bryan College Station economy, especially employment numbers. So if you look at here, we're comparing the current recession, the Great Shutdown due to the pandemic, the black line, with respect to the 2 previous recessions. The Great Recession caused by the housing boom and housing bust, right? And then the 2001 recession, there was the tech recession, as it's called also. Right away, you can see how the Bryan College Station economy lost approximately around 16,000 jobs in a matter of 2 months. That's extraordinary compared to previous recessions. Look at that red line and that blue line. Basically, because of the importance of Texas A&M University, the primary source of employment here in the MSA, well, you've kind of been, the MSA has been isolated, right, to previous recessions. Not a lot, but still you're isolated. But you can zero away the hit of the pandemic, boom, in a matter of months, you lose around 16,000 jobs in the economy. That shows you the impact it had in our local economy. Now, just to give you the numbers, I mentioned this as compared to US, Texas, and BCS. Of course, the numbers are going to be much greater, right? We have a smaller MSA compared to the US and Texas, but think about where are we right now, right? US lost we lost in our country 22 million jobs in a matter of 2 months. In their state, we lost 1.4 million jobs. Here in BC and Bryan College, we lost around 60,000 jobs. The good news, we're in the recovery path. We're gaining jobs. If you look at the last numbers for March, the Texas economy gained around 100,000 jobs in 1 month. That's awesome. That's great. That shows you the recovery is strong and is gaining strength. Why is that? One of the major reasons is because of the fiscal stimulus enacted by the federal government. That's allowing us, pushing the economy forward. And also the opening of the economy also has allowed us to continue to recover. So we're on the right path, the good news, right? Still, we're still below original numbers, right? Right now, in the case of the U.S. economy is still behind pre-pandemic levels, around 8.4 million jobs. The Texas economy is around below 470,000 jobs. And here in Bryan College Station, we're still below 6,000 jobs, right? So just to put it more in normal terms or standardize it, where are we, right? So recovered jobs, U.S. has recovered around 62% of the jobs lost due to the pandemic. Texas economy higher, almost 68% of the jobs have been recovered. And here in Bryan College Station, we're a little bit lower. Only around 61% of the jobs have been recovered after the pandemic shut down the economy, hit the economy. Claims here in Bryan College Station, these are the number of people actually declaring themselves unemployed. Right away, you can see from when we started the pandemic, before we started the pandemic, when actually we shut down the economy in March 21st of last year, the big jump in unemployment claims, and then the subsequent decrease in those numbers, right? And currently, if you add up the numbers from March 21st to April 10th, Bryan College Station, around 25,000 people have declared themselves unemployed, compared to the Texas level, around 4.8 million people have declared themselves unemployed during that period. But the good news, you look at the trend, it continues to slow down, and we're coming back to pre-pandemic levels. That's the good news for the economy. Jobs are coming back. The job market is improving. Unemployment rates. This is a great stat. Look at that red line. That's Bryan College Station. Look at the employment rate before the pandemic hit the economy. Really low, even lower compared to the U.S. and Texas state level unemployment rate. It was around 2.9%. Wow. Of course, the pandemic hits the economy. It only increases up to 9%. Why? Again, the majority of jobs here in our locality are where? At Texas A&M University. So it's kind of isolated on the effects of the pandemic, right? So not such bad numbers, not a lot of people, unfortunately, not unemployed here in our area. And then, of course, the gradual decline in the employment rate, all the way current, the last number for March, it's around 5.4%. Good news, job market, again, is getting better. So the economy is getting better. Just to show you by sector, which were the sectors that were hit the most, this graph on the left has the sectors, and also in that parentheses is the percentage of those jobs, right? So government jobs are, for Bryan College Station, they represent around 37% of the jobs here in Bryan-College Station. Why? Again, Texas A&M University, right? So you go that percentage. So if you look at, we're comparing here quarter to quarter, that's the red line, growth rates. We compare it to year over year. So if you compare with respect to the last year, all of them normally have a negative number, with the exception of professional business services. They're actually up with respect to pre-pandemic levels. So actually, professional business services here in Bryan-College Station are above the levels before the pandemic. So basically, they're back. Professional business services here in Bryan-College are back to pre-COVID levels, right? And actually, they're growing. That's great news. So overall, you can see the red line is showing us those growth rates. All the sectors, with the exception of manufacturing, are showing positive growth. That means the economy is on the right track. The blue lines are showing us that we're still below those pre-pandemic levels. Of course, which sector was hit the most? It was leisure and hospitality. That sector was hit the most due to the pandemic. Why? Because it's an industry that cannot socially distance, right? So those jobs haven't come back. But once the economy continues and we continue to reopen the economy, those jobs will come back, right? So look at that blue line that showed you there. We're still down around 21% of those jobs lost before the pandemic, March to March, but they're coming back. Positive numbers, 60.2%, as we see restaurants and bars opening up once again. Excuse me for that, it's the mouse. Okay, so going forward, just to make one thing clear, the road to recovery depends on health outcomes. This is a totally different recession than the recessions we had in the past. Why? Because it was caused by a health crisis. Okay, so before, compared to other recessions, how did we get out of the recession, right? It was caused because of some kind of financial disbalance, like think about the 2006, 2007 housing boom and bust. What happened? We had lax oversight, loose lending standards that allowed a lot of people to get home credits, mortgages, where they shouldn't have gotten those mortgages in the first place, right? So we held all that money there, but this didn't happen this occasion. What happened? We had a health crisis that basically killed almost the 10-year expansion we were living through, right? So that's the major cost. So going forward, like I mentioned earlier, the good news that vaccines are there, vaccination rates are increasing, and that will allow us to put the pandemic behind us. As you look at the total cases, yes, they've been rising, but if you look at the trend, they've been slowing down. Look at the daily cases, COVID-19 cases for Bryan-College Station. Look at that blue line. It shows you a downward trend in new cases of COVID-19 cases here in Bryan-College Station. That's great news for us, because once we have zero on that red graph, on the graph on the right, zero number of new cases, then we can think about actually ending the health crisis going forward. Now, what did we see? This is really interesting. I think this is cool. What happened in 2020? The pandemic actually accelerated trends already prevalent before the pandemic. One major issue was income inequality. Low-educated, low-skilled workers have been hit the hardest. Why? I mentioned this earlier, because they work in industries they cannot socially distance. Example, leisure hospitality, bars and restaurants, hotels. All of these households have lost their jobs and are trying to return back to the labor force, right? And that's affected the rental market compared to the housing market. So think about who purchases a home, who owns a home, right? They're more educated. They work in industries that can socially distance. Homeowners have those characteristics that allow them to earn higher wages. So one of the major reasons why the housing market hasn't been affected compared to the rental market is because of that. owner households that own homes were educated, work in industries that haven't been hit by the pandemic. They can work in industries that can socially distance. So that's one of the reasons why the housing market has done much better than the rental market. But we saw this trend even before the pandemic hit the economy, and it accelerated that trend. The return on education pays, and the numbers show that, right? Again, another benefit for the housing industry that we saw this even before the pandemic hit the economy was working from home. We had the assumability of working from home. We didn't test it as much, but now when the pandemic hit the economy, what happened? We utilized that new tool, that's Zoom, right? And we can work from home, right? So it accelerated that trend. Now, another trend that we saw before the pandemic was the purchase of goods and services online. We saw that. And once the pandemic hit the economy, boom, it accelerated that trend. Now, another trend that has implications going forward also is automation and the digitalization of the economy. We saw that trend. A lot of jobs are becoming automated and digitalized, right? And now, after the pandemic, there's a bigger trend for that to happen. And that's going to have implications for the jobs of the 21st century going forward, where you need to go back to my first part of it when I mentioned it. You have to be more educated, right? You have to have higher skills for the jobs of the 21st century. So we saw these trends. Now, the two trends, working from home, the other trend that benefited the housing market was the trend of working from home. What did we see? An increase in the preferences of purchasing of a bigger home. What happened? Now that I can work from home and there's no need for me to go to my office, right, and commute down to my office, what do I need? I need to get a bigger house that has an office in it where I can work from my home comfortably, right? And that was a big help, big boost to the housing market. And that's one of the other reasons why we're seeing such a strong housing market in 2020 and currently. So I mentioned this earlier, right? People are hurt most during the crisis, low skill, low wage workers. They're more renters, they're not homeowners. The majority of renters that cannot afford to buy a house. We did lose some first-time home buyers, right, due to the pandemic, and a study that work from home trend. And that supported the preference by households to what? To purchase a home. And that's why we're seeing one of the reasons why we're seeing such a strong housing market. Now, we saw this trend also before the pandemic. Housing supply has been lagging behind housing demand, especially starter homes in starter homes. And I think that's going to continue in the short run and maybe medium term. Just to give you the numbers, the demographics, what I'm talking about, right? These are the numbers for Texas. In a minute, I'll talk about the numbers for Bryan College Station. But just to give you an overall trend of what you see, I talked about this. So what's the difference between a homeowner and a renter? These are Texas numbers. Look at the mean and the median income from owner versus renter. The median household income for an owner is around $122,000. For a renter, is around $60,000 here in the state of Texas. So there's differences there. And again, why are those differences? Again, one of the major reasons is because owners are more educated. They work in industries that can socially distance, right? All of that benefit the housing market, right? How about the age of the renter versus of the owner? The median age of an owner-renter, owner is much older, 43 age, the 43 years old, the mean, versus a renter that's 33. The median, 46 for an owner, compared to 30 for an owner. So much older households, right? How about the race? Here with race, that's related to education, income, all this is related, right? The race of owners, renters, the majority white compared to blacks, while the majority are renters and other races, right? So that shows you, and all this is related. Now, I talked about this characteristics of owners versus renters. Education, the importance of education. Think about education. Also, the big major difference. Homeowners have at least 1 or more years of college. 42% of homeowners in the state of Texas are at least have 1 year of college, compared to a renter that's around 34.5%. Grade 12. So think about it. Renters are lesser educated than homeowners. That shows you, that explains why the housing market is doing much better compared to the rental market. Now, children also, right? Majority of owners have 1 child or more compared to renters. So also, what do they work at, right? Going to where I'm talking about earlier, homeowners have the benefit of working in socially distanced industries and were laid off, right? On the contrary, they felt secure enough to go out and purchase a new home, right? A bigger home, right? So look at the renter, the profile of the renter, whether renters work, they're cashiers, they're cooks, they're retail salespersons, all these industries were hurt by the pandemic. Compared to an owner, he's a manager, elementary and middle school, he works in manufacturing. So that gives you an idea of those effects, right? What I'm talking about. Put them all together, right? The importance of education, explain some part of it, where it allows them where they work, determines the income level, determines if you're owner or a renter, right? Now, let's talk about migration now. This is interesting. So contrary to popular beliefs, most moves in 2020 during the pandemic, right? People moved during the pandemic, right? That's why we've seen all these important movement in housing were within the state, not between states. Big reason why is that renters did not move. So that goes back to my earlier discussion. Renters were hit the hardest by the pandemic versus homeowners. They couldn't move, right? Because job insecurity, they're probably laid off. So, and also, they probably had to stay where they're living, right? So that move dragged down the overall immigration count. On the other hand, homeowners moves grew. And that goes back, look at the housing sales numbers, right? They support that, right? Homeowners were the ones that were moving. And again, goes back to what I'm saying earlier. They work in industries socially distanced. They have certainty and security about their jobs. And that allowed them to be what? You know what? I need a new house, a bigger house, right? And I'm going to move and we're not going to purchase a new house, right? Most moves were with the same metro, but less in dense areas. That goes back also to the pandemic where people wanted to move further away and they could get more bang for their buck, get a bigger house, right? And also you weren't affected by the idea that you have to commute every day to your office, right? Growth mainly to suburb areas instead of rural areas. Movers wanted to more space, but still enjoy the city amenities. So outside the cities, right? Outside the city limits. Moving to our principal cities, the actual cities, okay. So some cities were actually in decline, Dallas, Austin, Houston, but COVID pushed that threat further away. So that shows you the national mover counts for renters. You can see right away, renters are moving less and less and less. And you can see in the pandemic that accelerated that trend, right? Okay, why did movers move? Why? Not in particular order. I mentioned this earlier. When own a home, when a better neighborhood, retirement, job hunting, replacement. Also the pandemic. All these things is 2020, the pandemic. All these things played a role. The reasons why they declined in moving, for me, that declined in last year, which is a new job or transfer, move closer to a job, shorter commute, wanted a newer or better outcome. Let's look at that 2019 demographics. So just to give you some stats first, homeowner sample includes household or individuals that occupy single-family homes, townhomes, condos, etc. Renter sample includes households or individuals that live in single-family homes, apartments, but we're not going to talk about TAMU dormitories. There are no TAMU dormitories here in the data, right? Sorry about that. Excuse me for that. So percent of in-state migration, what did we see? So the big jump, the increase in that. Now, think about 2008. What does it explain? Does it explain that big jump is after the Cuts and Jobs Act? What happened? You know, a lot of you know, the income levels, also the state income levels. Other states changed the policy where you cannot deduct in the federal tax rate. You cannot deduct your state income tax, like California and New York. That's why one of the major comparative advantage we have here in the state of Texas. So there was a big jump in 2010. We had also, don't forget, we got a check that year. That explains a lot of that big jump in state in 2018, and then the subsequent decline, right? But still, percentage migration is a high percentage, no? You know, sorry, the high percentage is from California. That's all of the people that are coming in from California. One major reason was that, you know, again, that tax cut and the benefits of living in Texas compared to California and other states where you have a state income tax. Now, migration counties, high five migration counties for Bryan College Station. The majority of the people, the percent of movers, are moving in from Harris County, from Houston, right? Then we have Travis County. Then we have Tarrant County, and that gives you a good idea of where people are moving from to Bryan College Station, right? And of course, some of you know this when you talk to your clients. They'll tell you, I'm moving from Austin, I'm moving from Houston, I'm moving from Dallas. Now, some demographics for Bryan College Station. There was around almost 92,000 households in Bryan College Station. Of those, around 51% are owner-occupied household. They own a home, and around almost 49% are renter-occupied. Again, I talked about this earlier. The differences in incomes, right? The owner-occupied households have earned a higher income above $100,000 compared to renter owner-occupied households. The average number of income earners per household, owners around 2, almost, you know, both the husband and the wife work probably, right? Compared to a renter, right? One does work, but less than the owner-occupied. So you have two income earners in a household, an owner-occupied household compared to a renter. That could explain also why the difference between owners and between income and renters. The mean of age, I told you this. Owners in Bryan College Station are older. They're 50 years older. That's the mean. With respect to renters, 35. That makes sense. Called College Town. So 25% of the homeowners households have a head of a household, spouse or partner with at least a 4-year degree. Educated. They're educated. And another 2% may have a postgraduate degree. So owner households, homeowners are educated here in Bryan College Station, right? 40% of renters not living in dorms and moved in 2008 were enrolled in school, right? So 40% of the renters not living in dorms moved in 2008 and were enrolled in school. Just to look at a little map of our Bryan College Station, right, with the different zip codes. And what are the movers? The movers. So net family movers at Wixom Valley East, zip code 77808. We can see right away the trend, right? Always you can see it's not getting adjusted. And right away you can see the moves. When do the moves happen? You know this better than not. We know this happened during the summer, where when we don't have a school year, right? And you can see the trend of 2020, the increase in housing sales. We see how those moves increase. Now look at the green line for 2021. You can right away, you can see it with respect to 2019, the movers are higher. Now, February, they're lower, but that, just think about what happened in February. We had the winter storm Uri, and that affected outcomes there, right? So these are the net movers, right? The numbers of people moving in for that zip code. How about net in 77808 College Station? Again, you can see the change in net family move-ins during that period of time. Again, it's interesting for something to catch an eye. Just a shout out to Josh Robertson for helping me out with all this cool stats with the numbers. Is that it's interesting to see that the move-ins in College Station, the zip code, during the month of August, September, October. That's interesting for us. Why? Because school already started, right? You expect those move-ins to happen during May, June, July, right? But the big move-ins occurred during August, September, October. An interesting thing you can see right away. Look at that green column for January, February. You can see right away that 2021 trends are higher for move-ins for this zip code in 2021 compared to the previous years. Now, how are the permits doing? They're doing great. Single-family construction is doing well. It's increasing. We saw that big boom at the end of 2020, mid-2020, an increase for here, 100 number of single-family permits per month. That means it's a high rate. Normally, it doesn't reach 100 a month. The 100 number of permits per month. But look at that increase. It went all the way up to almost 180 permits in one month. And constantly, they still remain relatively high. That shows you that home construction continues at a strong pace. So how is the MLS activity going out? So these are the sales, the pending listings, the new listings for Brazos County. You can see right away the good news. New listings and pending listings are up. To help us with one of the major headwinds facing the housing market what is that? The lack of inventory of homes for sale. The good news is that you can see that blue line, that green line, they're up, the number of listings. Great news for sales going forward. So selling season is off to an early start. Great news. Now, how about the home sales by price range? This is an issue going forward in Texas, in Austin, in Dallas-Fort Worth, even here in Bryan College Station, El Paso. The majority of the market share has changed. The majority of the sales, people still want to buy homes with a price tag. In this case, below $160,000. The issue is, can you find a home with a price below $160,000? Right? The months of inventory of those homes are basically, nothing. Right? So that's the issue. But look at the composition of home sales by price range. The up to 160,000 are higher. The mid up to 240,000 are higher. That green line and blue line, and above $240,000. Yes, they have slowed down. Still strong, but still has slowed down. The majority of the sales are between those prices below $240,000. But still showing strong growth. Now, the major issue I think facing the housing market in 2021 is the lack of months of inventory of homes available for sale, right? Months of inventory, different zip codes. You have the Bryan College Station zip codes. Look at those months of inventory. 1.4 months of inventory for the 77800 zip code. The one that has a higher zip code but still low, 77840 zip code, around 3.21 months of inventory. When a normal market, you would think how much is a normal market? 6 months of inventory. Think about where I live, my zip code, 77845, only around 1.4 months of inventory. And look at the change, the year-over-year change, historically low. So that's a major headwind going forward, is that those lacking massive inventory when we still have such strong demand going forward. So what happens? Think about your simple economics class, principles of economic class. When you have strong demand facing weak supply, what happens to prices? They go up, and they go up by a lot. Especially think about this. This is a really cool index. We produce it here in our center. It's a repeat sales index. Is the same home sold through time? So we eliminate some of the issues facing when you talk about median home prices or mean home prices. Here, you eliminate those factors. Is the same home sold through time? It's sold through the multiple listing service. Actually, Josh Robertson says, Josh does a great job. He estimates this here at the center. It's a great product for us. Please consult us. Look for it here at the center. And you can see right away the price growth extremely high for Austin, almost year-over-year growth. First quarter of 2021, 23%. That's crazy. That's a crazy number, unsustainable number. Bryan College Station around 4.2% growth rate in the first quarter of 2021. More manageable numbers, still a positive, strong number. Dallas-Fort Worth 11%, Houston 7.7%, and San Antonio again double-digit numbers in home price growth. Again, some of those numbers for Austin, Dallas-Fort Worth, San Antonio are not sustainable. We expect for prices to slow down somewhat. Why? Mortgage rates are increasing, and that would put less pressure on weakened demand somewhat, and also because of the strong price appreciation that's probably going to price out some future home buyers from the housing market. Now, an important subject to talk about this passed recently, the restricted occupancy overlay. We saw that. So actually, how many people will be affected by that? We know that it passed. So again, the limit now is 2 unrelated persons within an original household. So we counted. Of course, this is bigger. We don't have the data just for College Station. We have to do Brazos County. So in Brazos County, we counted the number of households that have in them single-family households, right? Single-family homes that have more than 2 related occupants in that household, right? So if you sum them all up, there are around 2,500 households in the Brazos County region that have more than 3 or more unrelated persons or people in that household, right? So think about it. If we talk about College Station, it was half of that numbers. Around 1,200 households would be affected by the new restricted occupancy overlay. So, and that's a lot for our region, right? So going forward, what's going to happen to the housing market? I think, again, I mentioned this earlier. This is really important. The path to recovery depends on COVID-19 outcomes. The good news is under control. We have the vaccination rates, but there's still some risk there of possible variants of the COVID-19 virus, right? So economic recovery could be hindered going forward. Why? Because of possible upsurges in COVID-19 cases. Future wave of infections can reverse what we gained, that mobility, that spending power, the path to recovery. The good news, the pandemic is expected to be under control by the end of the year. Thank God, right? Due to the vaccine distribution. So we can finally move on. Going back to normal, well, to the new normal, right? So again, good news for the economy. Expecting really strong growth in 2021. U.S. economy expected to grow around 6.5% in real terms in 2021. That's a lot, right? Why? Due to the effects of the vaccination and the stimulus bill. Employment should continue to recover. All the jobs I mentioned to you earlier, we should recover most of those jobs. And then in some cases, Texas, Bryan College Station included, we should be above pre-pandemic job levels at the end of the year. The housing market will be characterized by what? By low inventories and strong price growth, right? Although, low inventories will be especially prevalent for what? For homes around $300,000, affecting home sales in this price range. Price growth will be positive due to stable demand. Economic recovery will continue, helped by the fiscal stimulus and the vaccination rates. And again, more millennials, they're more educated, they work in industries they can socially distance, will be entering the market, right? Lack of housing inventory is the major headwind going forward. Builders are trying to satisfy demand. They're doing their best. Given the strong demand, there's still new home supply will continue to lag. We saw this trend. They're building in new homes in the suburbs and outer city borders. Why? Land costs are lower, right? They can make a higher profit. They can build a bigger house, especially to build lower price homes. Trend was prevalent prior to the pandemic, but has accelerated to the COVID-19 pandemic. We expect in 2021 the rate of growth of new home sales, the pace of growth will outpace existing home sales. Why is that? Because of new homes coming into the market and because of lack of homes for sale, the listings. Of course, that could change. If we see a big upsurge in listing numbers, that could help out the existing home sales, right? But that depends on that. Now, I mentioned this earlier. Mortgage rates are expected to increase somewhat. Why? Think about your finance class 101. Interest rates, including mortgage rates, equal what? The real rate you get, right? The real rate plus inflation. If inflation goes up, what happens to interest rates? They go up. Simple as that. So we're expecting higher inflations, not out of control inflation. Inflation is going up, and that's going to raise interest rates, right? But they will remain relatively low due to the monetary policy implemented by the Fed. We've seen this already. Mortgage refinancing is slowing down as mortgage rates rise and the pool of household ability to refinance diminishes. Now, this was another major reason why the housing market is doing so well, is that mortgage rates were at historical lows. They've increased somewhat, right? And that was a big push also to the housing market in 2020, and it's currently in 2021. Excuse me. I just want to show you this graph. Just you can see it. You see that relationship I talked about, the relationship between interest rates and inflation. The black line on the bottom is inflation. When that black line goes up, it pushes up mortgage rates and bond rates. This is the 10-year Treasury. If that black line starts to go down, mortgage rates and bond rates go down. Why have we seen since the 1980s interest rates go down constantly through the years? Because inflation has gone down constantly through the years also. But as you look at this graph, at the end of the graph, look at that black line at the end of it. What do you see? An upsurge, an increase in inflation. And what's that's going to bring with it? Somewhat higher mortgage rates, right? Now, I get this question a lot, especially when you see such strong home price appreciation. Is a housing bubble forming? So let's think about 2000. Let's go back in our time machines and go back to 2006 and 2007. What were the characteristics of the 2006-2007 housing bubble? First, loose lending standards. That's not happening currently, right? Think about that comment people make a lot. And go back 2006, 2007. Anybody that could breathe, basically, could get a mortgage loan. That changed after that financial crisis. I just refinanced my home. It's not as easy. I bought a new house a couple of years ago, thanks to a local realtor, Lindsay. Shout out to Lindsay. She helped us out purchasing a new home. There's a lot of regulation. There's the adequate regulation now when you purchase a home. So there's no loose lending standards currently, right? It's not like, oh, I want a home. Yes, here's the credit for the mortgage. No. Lax oversight. Also, the government, the financial institutions, there was lax oversight looking over the housing market. A lot of people that shouldn't have gotten a loan got a loan, right? And didn't do anything about it. That affected the housing market. Those things are not prevalent currently in the current housing market. I think it's more of a supply bottleneck, right? A lack of supply. Exorbitant speculation. What happened in 2007, 2007? People bought a home for an investment motive, right? They had 2 or 3 homes. I want to buy this home. I want to flip the home. I want to rent the home. Now, currently, why are people buying a home? There's a consumption motive. I want a home because I want a bigger home, because I'm going to work from my house. I want a house with an office, right? I want a bigger space for my kids. All of these things are playing a role in why people are buying homes, they're buying actually bigger homes, right? I don't have to go to my office every day, commute to my office. Probably after this, the pandemic is going to bring with us a hybrid. And all of these factors are benefiting the housing market. Now, just to show you what I see, I've done this in the past what I'm trying to do here is I'm comparing the actual house price index from the Federal Housing Financial Agency. And what I do is then I estimate the blue line is the actual number, right? The red line is, I estimate what should be the FHA house price index based on fundamentals. I use median household income for Bryan College Station, the housing starts or permits for Bryan College Station, the population, the jobs in Bryan College Station, and then I estimate that red line. So when that red line is below that blue line, that shows you that there's some kind of misalignment between what prices should be and what they currently are, right? Based on fundamentals. And that shows you that something is happening when you have that misalignment between actual prices and what they should be, right? So that goes back to the issue we're facing with the lack of supply, possibly causing that misalignment right there. Now, this is important going forward. Mortgage Bankers Association reports that around 2.3 million homeowners, around 4.5% of all home loans are in forbearance. Remember, one of those programs the government implemented, the forbearance program. So once forbearance ends, there's a lot of questions regarding this. The share of homeowners able to make mortgage payments is unknown. We do expect delinquencies and foreclosures to increase somewhat, not a lot. So far, it kept low because despite the recession due to the government policy of the forbearance and also the income checks we received through the mail, right? But the good news is that given such a strong housing market that's facing such low inventory of homes for sale, the housing market could absorb those houses if they ever came up in foreclosure, right? I think these households, if they face the issue of probably losing their homes, they could go to the housing market and sell those homes without any problem, right? The housing market would be able to absorb those homes with the current low months of inventory we're facing. Just to give you a number for Texas, I just give an estimate based on the numbers for the Mortgage Bankers Association. Around 265,000 mortgages were past due at the end of 2020. Now, let's look at that, especially the ones that are more than 90 days past due, right? That's around 50,000 of those mortgages were more than 90 days past due. So let's compare that to the number of active listings and the number of pending listings. So let's say if those mortgages were to come up to the market and say those houses would say, you know what, I'm going to sell those homes. So they would represent around 34% of the active listings currently in March and around 37 of the pending listings currently. So I think that would be those houses would come in and they would be absorbed by the current housing market. And just some numbers for Bryan College Stations, how many, the percentage of households that are in forbearance and delinquency. This is Bryan College Station numbers. They've decreased since the pandemic started. Last known number is up to November of 2020, a little bit below 5%. That's really low, right? And think about the numbers that are actually non-forborn, that are more than 30 days past due. It's a little bit around above 2%. So that's not an issue for the housing market, right? Going forward. So thank you very much. I enjoyed being with you, and I hope you enjoyed the talk and you found it useful. So let's see if we have any comments or questions that you want to discuss with me.
Yeah, so I've actually got a couple of questions that came in. So let me make a couple of adjustments here to our presentation view so I can get my folks that I need pinned. But we've got one question in particular, and I think there might be a couple of people who want to unmute and ask a question as well.
Yeah, go ahead.
We did get a question that came in to me directly, and it's talking about the raw material costs. We've got builder representation on our meeting today, and it's a big concern about how that's causing some issues, with supply. And so what are your thoughts and kind of your crystal ball, so to speak, even though Jim Gaines will tell you there's no such thing as a crystal ball in research, but what are your thoughts on when you think that might level out with those extreme raw material cost issues?
Yeah, especially plywood, right? I didn't bring that slide with me, but if you look at the numbers, historical highs in lumber prices, the BLS, the PPI, it reaches like an increase of about around 84%. That's a historical high, 84% annual increases in plywood. So that's extraordinary by itself, right? And I think that's a major issue facing the home builders in our country, right? And again, that's one of the bottlenecks we're facing, right? Currently, when we shut down the economy and we start to reopen the economy, and the housing market is doing such externally well that unfortunately a lot of the mill production, the wood production, the plywood production is lagging behind. So we have that big issue. I think as we move on, I can at the end of the year probably, I think it could start to simmer down a little bit, like go back to more controllable levels, right? It's hard to see with the mill production and the supply and such strong demand currently, but I think at the end of the year possibly we can start to see some more like a little bit of decline in those prices and the supply. I think it's too tight. I think in the coming months supply should start to increase definitely, and I think that should alleviate some of the pressures in plywood. But I think notable changes, I think probably until the end of the year, probably. Hopefully, right?
Hopefully is correct.
54% is incredible. The numbers I'm talking about, I have the numbers all the way back to 1940s, and never in the history in the 20th century, 21st century, until we've seen that amount of increases in plywood. Even during the Second World War, by the way, we never saw that increase in plywood prices. So that's extraordinary, and it's hurting the home builders and it's affecting supply.
Wow.
Our National Association of Home Builders reported that lumber costs are up 200% this year than they were the same time last year. So, and we have representatives on a national level that are speaking very strongly to our legislators to let them know what is happening on a local level, national level, and how it's affecting the demand for housing.
Right, but you know what? The good news, it would be worse. Let me just give you like a good news. Last year, thank God for the home builders, they lobby it. And don't forget, last year we actually eliminated the tariff from Canadian lumber. Last year we had a tariff on Canadian lumber, and it's gone, thank God. So imagine if we still had that tariff.
Yes.
Ooh. So
we'd be in trouble.
We'll be in worse trouble than we're at currently.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank God that's gone. They did something. Thank God something good was done, right? And we eliminated that tariff in Canadian lumber.
Yes.
So we've also got, if anybody wants to unmute, let's not try to talk all at once, but if you want to unmute and ask Dr. Torres a question, you can go ahead and do that now.
Dr. Torres, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hi, my name is Eleanor Vasali. Thank you so much for speaking to us today. Really appreciate the information and the perspective. I had a question going back to when you were showing us the data on rentals and the slide about who would be affected by the no more than two.
Yes. Let me go back. Let me you just can see that, right? This one. That's the one you want to talk about.
Yes.
Yes.
And again, I apologize if you did speak to this. Could you remind me where do y'all pull this data from? How did you get your total for your sample?
So again, let me just do another shout out again to Josh Robertson. He did a great job. He helped me out with a lot of these numbers. We got this from the census numbers, by the way.
Okay.
So all the demographic numbers I showed you, sorry, I didn't put the source. I should have put the source. All map sources, but this is from the U.S. Census 2019 numbers. Okay.
Okay.
So he looked at this. Well, Josh, we looked at the numbers and looked at the counts, the actual counts, based on the census numbers of the households that actually declare themselves with three unrelated persons within that house, within that single family home. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. No, absolutely.
So these are the numbers. So the only issue, like I mentioned earlier, this includes the whole Brazos County, right? That's the only issue. So we're estimating for the whole Brazos County, and this rule doesn't apply to the whole Brazos County, right? So that's why I mentioned earlier that imagine if it's College Station, think about it, maybe half. So if it was half, around 1,250 households would be affected in College Station, right? So that's not a small number, right?
No, that is not small. And I guess my concern, because the data that, me as the average citizen can get my hands on, for example, being from College Station, is an open records request of their rental registration. And so already when I filter that, they have a list that includes duplex, triplex, et cetera. And when I filter for single family, already in College Station, single families that are registered for rental is at 6,600. Now, just as you mentioned, I unfortunately do not have the data as to, are they 3 unrelated, 4 unrelated, but I just found those numbers. And of course, we all know, census data as well as voluntary. We only get as much as what people are willing to share.
Right.
One other question, back a couple slides as well. I don't know if I misread that percentage of owner versus rental occupied. I think there was like a 48%. And I don't remember where that, there we go.
There you go.
Okay. Okay. And again, I'm going to assume that census database.
Correct. This is the census.
Okay.
2019 numbers from the U.S. Census.
Okay. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Of course. And I'll send the presentation to Rosemary and Amy, by the way. It's for you. It's for everybody who wants it, right? I did it for you guys. It's not for me, right?
Thank you.
Mr. Torres?
Oh, go ahead, Jim.
I'm a builder as well as a broker and all that, but my intention was to build what we call affordable housing, however you want to define that, but housing that we could sell, new homes that we could sell in the neighborhood of 175 to 225,000. But of course, what you said, the price of lumber, obviously I know how much it's gone up in comparison to what I was paying. And so my question, I guess, to you is, do you have any data that would tell you that those prices could come down in the next year? Because it's got me and a lot of builders stopped. I mean, you can't buy the land and build anything on it for hardly less than $160 a square foot. And I mean, no matter what you're building, it's just beyond reason to even think about building something if you're going to try to build something that people could afford to buy. But we don't see any end to the price of material, particularly lumber, but there are other things that are also impacting that.
So a great question, Jim. And so here it's important to look at, so think about how much production, actual numbers in production. So think about, the reason I'm saying this is because I'm looking at the actual mill production output in mills, how much they're actually, based on the U.S. On the Bureau of Economic Analysis. I'm looking at the numbers and how they're ramping up, right? How they're increasing. Now, this characteristic is not, this issue is not only in the housing market. It's also in the automotive industry. I don't know if you currently have tried to buy a new car or have the idea of trying to buy a new car, but they're having also a great number of issues with microchips, the chips, because now cars have so much.
I was going to say computer industry's facing it too,
Exactly.
telephones and everything else.
So it's not just the builders, right? Computers, technology, automotive, manufacturing. This is one of the major issues and that's also pushing up prices. So why is inflation going up also? Because we're facing all these bottlenecks, all these supply bottlenecks currently.
Yeah.
So as we move forward, right, I think those are going to start to be solved, right? Because output is going to go up. I'm a producer of a sawmill. I see the demand, the market's there, but I have to ramp up production, right? But as you know, it takes time. It's not like I click my fingers and I can produce what I want to, right? So I think as we move on and production ramps up, I think you would definitely start to see prices, just kind of weaken a little bit, right? I don't see that, couple of months because right now it's a strong season, strong market. But further on down the road, I do see that, right? And going back to your number, Jim, email me and I'll share with you. Let me try to share with you the actual numbers, the production of mill production, of plywood production in our country. And you need to complement that because a lot of it also is imported from Canada, right? That's one of the major suppliers of our wood.
Or lumber, yes.
Yeah, for lumber, exactly. So complement with the import numbers to see where are we, right? And if we are back to pre-pandemic levels, output wise, with respect to lumber, right?
Well, and I think too, Dr. Torres, if you'll share that information with me, we can put it part of what both of our organizations send out, because Rose is going to send out
Really.
the same information to the Builders Association members, and I think that would be helpful for everyone to have.
What I could do is, this presentation is finished. I could go back and include those numbers, the plywood. When I talk about when I mention those prices, the price numbers, I know some of you, like Rosemary mentioned some higher numbers. Jim could have other numbers, even higher numbers. What I'm talking about is what the BLS does, when it goes to the producer, and it's an average number, right? But locally, there can be higher rates, right? But that gives you an idea of what's happening. But I can include the plywood PPI, producer price index numbers, and I can also include the production, the actual how much is being produced in our country, and include also the import numbers, so that where are we right now, right? Are we back to those pre-COVID levels, and what to expect going forward? So that'll give you an idea to what's happening currently and down the road, right?
That would be great. Thank you so much, Dr. Torres. So I think we're hitting our time here. So we really appreciate you presenting today. And Rose, do you want to close out the meeting for us?
Wonderful presentation, Amy. Thank you so much for putting this together. And Dr. Torres, great information. You really covered a broad spectrum, and were very specific to each of our industries and how they interlock together. And so I appreciate the information that you put together for us, and we look forward to realtors as well as builder members going out to our parade of homes that's starting over the next couple of weekends. And we know that the housing market is hot, and just hope that our supply can meet the demand, and we all stay busy. We appreciate you very much, and we look forward to doing this again in a couple of months.
Thank you a lot.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Have a great afternoon.